Eric Herner. There's something that puzzles me leading on from one of your last videos about life on the Freewinds and how it came about that people handed their passports into the organization. I have heard a number of stories of ex-Scientologists who felt they were trapped within the organization because their superiors had possession of their passports. I asked myself why this should have been such an issue for them. If I am in any foreign country and my passport is lost, stolen, or appropriated by someone, all I have to do is get hold of or go to my nearest consulate and report the issue, then apply for a new passport. Democratic countries generally go a long way towards supporting their citizens with such things. There is something about the ex-Scientologist's concern that seems to me pretty naive and ill-informed about their own rights as citizens and being able to stand up for these. I ask myself whether this mindset, this innocent overlooking of what makes me a citizen and a person of independence, might not be part of what makes someone susceptible to the machinations of such a cult. And you would be right, because somebody who has a strong independent attitude and a forceful personality is not somebody who's necessarily going to get involved in a destructive cult and fall for some of the trappings and nonsense that they feed to their members. At the same time, that's not always necessarily consistently true. There isn't a gene that people have that makes them susceptible to falling into a cult situation. There are so many different high control groups out there, and there are so many different ways of engaging in coercive persuasion and basically feeding on a person's inability to think things through, or feeding them enough lies and enough distortions and enough half-truths that they end up weaving themselves through this labyrinth of mental traps and landmines that you can get a person into a prison, but that prison is a prison of belief. This is why this expression that Lawrence Wright came up with for Scientology as a prison of belief is such a powerful metaphor, because that's exactly what these groups are. Rarely do destructive cults lock the doors, make somebody stay inside. I mean, it happens. It definitely happens. Don't get me wrong. But for the most part, the barriers and the traps and the locked doors are up here. That's where people feel stuck and trapped. And so when somebody later on says, well, I felt like I couldn't leave, I felt like, well, they had my passport, they forget things like their rights. They forget human rights. They forget human dignity. They forget independent thought because they get so mired in the labyrinth of thinking that goes on as a destructive cult member or as a person who's part of these high control groups. I mean, we call them destructive cults for a reason. Well, we also call them high control groups for a reason. There is an amazing amount. I mean, it's almost hard to appreciate unless you're in the situation and then can get some perspective on it by coming out of it. The degree of control that exists. It's hard to fathom because people who are independent and are not part of a group like this wonder, how could somebody surrender so much control to a leader or to a group or, to such a situation? Well, they do so because they truly, honestly buy into the premise of the group in the first place, whether it's that they're going to learn self-defense and martial arts, as a martial arts cult, for example. They're going to learn the way and the truth and the power of themselves. And so they're told that in order to gain this ultimate knowledge, they have to make an ultimate sacrifice. I mean, it's a balance, right? This is just one example. And in order to make that ultimate sacrifice, they have to give up themselves, their ego, their personality, their thought processes, their independence. They are told this is something you have to do, and they buy into that because they think that the carrot on the stick is worth going after and is worth all of this sacrifice. I don't know anybody who doesn't make sacrifices in their life that couldn't relate to this somehow if you just think about it. Giving up hours of your time in overtime at a job in order to sacrifice, you're sacrificing time with your family or your friends or your spouse or your girlfriend or your boyfriend. You make those sacrifices because you feel that there's something there to be gotten that's worth more in the short run. Then and you'll get this wonderful, wonderful thing, whether it's more money or it's a promotion, something like that, right? would be a lesser level of sacrifice compared to, sacrificing your entire life for one of these groups. But it's a comparable sort of idea I'm trying to communicate here, and I'm that you give up something that you think is only going to last for a while. No one thinks, and in Scientology, for example, even signing a billion-year contract and joining the Sea organization, or joining staff, you just sign for a 2.5-year or a 5-year stint. You feel like you are going to give your time, and you know that there are going to be sacrifices. You know you're not going to be having as much personal freedom. You know you're going to be sacrificing even some independence of thought and action. But you feel like you're doing this because maybe you're helping a whole lot of people, you're helping yourself, you're going to get all these free services and get up the bridge of Scientology. Because, believe me, people who sign up for staff, for example, or sign up for the Sea Org, are told in no uncertain terms, you're going to get your whole bridge for free. And they know that this bridge to total freedom that Scientology offers is hundreds of thousands of dollars. They don't have that, but they do have time to give. So they think that they're giving that for a short run, and they're going to get this amazing, wonderful, unbelievable benefit from it. So getting back to the passport issue, that's the kind of freedom that you give up, or you feel like you're giving up. Okay, here's my passport. And now that can act in a way as a symbolic handing over of your freedom in a way, or, handing over your personality or identity. I mean, there's some ritual or something connected with this. I'm just saying, in some ways of thinking, that kind of sacrifice is made, and you don't feel, when you're in that group and you're surrounded by all these people who are all on the same page, that this is the thing to do, and there isn't something better to do. And in fact, not only is there not something better to do, but leaving this group and going out and doing something else would be a tragedy of the first order. Because you'd be going out back into the junk garbage world that is just inundating you with lies and false information and aberrations, as they call it in Scientology, the WOG world, or the world of the reactive mind. Hubbard there's tons of references that you can, from L. Ron Hubbard, that you could sit somebody down who's considering leaving. If they still think L. Ron Hubbard knows what he's talking about, and most Scientologists, for example, do, you can pull out some heavy-duty references where Hubbard just says right there on the page, this world out there is a madhouse of insanity. And if you go out there, you're going to be surrounded by and overwhelmed by it. So this is the only place, as bad as it might be. He says, one of the things he said, for example, is we build a world on broken straws. Sometimes there are fatalities. Sometimes people fall down. We have to help pick them back up again. And here's a person, for example, here's this guy who wants to leave, and here's this person showing them these Hubbard references out of compassion and out of, I'm just trying to help you, man. You're trying to leave. You don't know what you're getting into. You don't know what's going to happen to you out there. Sure, we're not perfect, but at least we're on the right page, and we have L. Ron Hubbard's technology, and we know what to do, and we know where we're going. Don't you want that? Isn't that what you signed up for? Yeah, it's rough. We can help you out with some of the things that are going on that might be a little rough. Maybe you've been working this one job, you don't really like it, it's been rough for you. Maybe we can arrange to get you a different job that isn't so high pressure. They'll make accommodations. They'll work with the person. They'll try to, it's not all dirt, you shall, or you're gonna be, it's sure that happens too, but it's not always that way. The love bombing and the persuasion, those are very strong elements, especially when they come from somebody who is considered an authority figure. So, just look up, Stanley Milgram's experiments if you have questions about the percentage of people who can be persuaded to do pretty insane things just because an authority figure is telling them to do it. The numbers are around 75%, that just because an authority figure is ordering you to do something, you will do something quite inhumane to another human being. So, we know this. We know this through repeated, continual experiments on how people operate. So, that's why you seem to, from outside the bubble world, you look in and you go, that's crazy. I wouldn't do that. Why would they do that? Because their mind is in a totally different place than where yours is. Okay, so those are some of my random thoughts here in answer to your question. And so I hope that gives you a pretty broad look at, the way some of the mind control works and why people either, like I said, maybe they are susceptible to it, or maybe they just become more and more susceptible to it because of the gradual indoctrination and coercive persuasion that occurs to get them into that prison of belief.